Chapter 89, 2001, New York. Still, quiet, but for the rustling of a lifeless breeze across the barren landscape. Tall spires of rusted metal and crumbling concrete stood over the lost remnants of a place once called Times Square. The creak of a long-faded sign swinging from a lamppost, the squeak and bang of a window shutter somewhere, caught and played with by the haunting wind. A sickly yellow sun, behind scudding brown irradiated clouds, casts pallid beams down onto ashes and dust. From the darkness inside gutted and scorched buildings, milky eyes look out hungrily for some other meagre supply of food. A rat, a dog, if there are any left, perhaps another of its kind. Not a dying world, but a dead world, just waiting for these last pitiful skeletal survivors of mankind to realize the time has come for them to die. But, gently at first, the breeze freshens. That loose window shutter across the square bangs ever more heavily. Small clouds of dust whip along the ground. The wheel on a rusted and upended pram turns slowly with a click, click, click of bearings. Then faintly, blink and you'll miss it, the slightest shimmer, like the ripple across the hot tarmac of a motorway on a midsummer's day, the flicker of hot air above a bonfire. A shimmer, flickering, undulating, changing. The tallest spire overlooking Times Square now has windows, unbroken, as do the other buildings, one after the other. One can see clear roads and faint ghostly apparitions moving along them. Clearer now. Not ghostly, but solid. Cars, buses, trams, people. The sky has changed from an unhealthy poisoned brown to a wet Tuesday grey, and the persistent drizzle of mean-spirited rain. Tall, crimson-coloured banners with the emblem of a snake eating its tail suddenly adorn every lamppost. Placards appear above shop entrances featuring the face of a leader who promises to unite the world under his rule. Soldiers, in grey and black uniforms and tall leather boots, patrol soulless, ordered streets, full of soberly dressed civilians quietly, obediently, turning up for work. This, at least, is life, not a dead world any more. The breeze freshens again. The banners flutter, as if sensing something more is on its way. Another shimmer. Another change is coming, rippling through months, years, decades of time, as events realign, destinies change, and possibilities find correct versions of themselves. The wet grey sky slowly clears, the rain stops. The pennants and banners vanish with a whisper, the placards disappear. With a final flourish and twist of reality, Times Square becomes noisy, garish, busy, impatient, filled with rude people on mobile phones organising their day ahead, jostling each other for pavement space, queuing for breakfast bagels and Starbucks coffee. A giant green ogre called Shrek peers out from a poster. A homeless man pushing a shopping trolley full of cardboard boxes and topped with tarpaulin takes a moment to sit down on a bench and watch the busy world go by. A lovely blue sky, unseasonably warm for this time of year, and the distant drone of an approaching plane on the far horizon. Chapter 90, 2001, New York. Maddie lay on her cot in the dark. Opposite, she could hear Foster's laboured breathing, the wheezy rattle of an unwell man. All was quiet in the archway, save for the drip of water from the brick ceiling somewhere out in the darkness. The generator had finally stopped thudding. She had lost track of how long that had been now. Hours. A dozen? More? No power, no light. They'd used their last candle as they'd sat either side of the table and discussed their options should Liam and Bob fail. Not many options, if truth be told. The choices available to them boiled down to just one, really. When to do it. When to use the last 2 rounds in the shotgun. When they'd both be ready to admit that all was lost. She had not been foolish enough to let herself think this was actually going to work, that some foggily remembered date from an autobiography that should never have been written would lead Liam and Bob right to the cause of all this. No. That was the kind of unlikely happy ending that belonged on some cheesy TV show or some rubbish FX-laden blockbuster movie, the nick of time last-minute reprieve for the good guys that you always knew was going to happen right from the moment the opening credits rolled. Maddie's face was buried in the pillow when the ceiling lights in the office winked silently on. Half asleep, it wasn't until her ears registered the soft hum of the machinery that maintained the time bubble quietly initializing itself that she stirred and turned her face to one side. It took another long moment for her to realize the power had come back on. The archway was bathed in a flickering, clinical light. Is this for real? Or am I dreaming? She sat up quickly on her cot, almost banging her head against the rough springs of the bunk above, and smiled. It's not a dream. Foster! She reached across and shook his shoulder. Foster! His rustling breath caught, and with a moan of painful discomfort he roused and opened dark, sallow eyes. Ugh! What is it, Madeline? She pointed up at the bulb in the wire cage above them, glowing brightly. Foster, I think they did it. Several minutes later, they were standing outside in their rubbish-strewn back street, savouring the return of a familiar world. A lovely sunny day in September, the rumble of traffic over the Williamsburg Bridge above them, the honk of impatient horns, the distant wail of a police siren. Life. Impatient life. I've never seen anything so beautiful, cried Maddie, her cheeks unashamedly wet. Nor I. She stretched an arm round his sloped shoulders and planted a kiss on his cheek as dry and wrinkled as parchment. We made it, she whispered. Foster smiled. Then let's bring them home, shall we? The lights in the archway flickered momentarily as a result of the drain of power. The hum of the displacement machinery rose in pitch, and then, all of a sudden, there it was. Maddie could see the shimmering outline of the window in the middle of the floor, appearing in exactly the same place it had when they'd sent both of them back to 1941. Within the window she could see a faint rippling image, like a reflection in a disturbed pool of water. It looked to her like a world of trees and snow. Then into view, the wavering silhouette of something dark merged into the puddle-like image, unmistakably a human figure, someone coming to them. A moment later, Liam stepped alone onto the floor of the arch. Liam! Screamed Maddie with initial delight. Then she saw that his hands and arms were slick with wet and drying blood. His uniform, his neck, his face, pale like a ghost, were spattered with dark droplets. Oh my God, what happened? Liam, are you okay? He turned to look at her, his mouth struggling to reply, searching for words. Foster stepped forwards. Liam, lad, are you all right? He looked at the old man, frowning, struggling to take things in, blinking back the brightness from the strip lights above him. Finally he nodded as he opened the palm of one hand and held out something metallic. It was the size of a small mobile phone and coated with clots of drying blood. I managed to... He took a breath and tried again. Well, anyway, here's Bob. Foster reached for the object, taking it from him gently. You did well, Liam, he replied softly, knowing full well the grisly deed that Liam had just carried out. That's no easy thing to do. Come and sit down, lad, he added, leading him over to the table and chairs. Dead Did we do it? Liam asked. Maddie grinned and hugged him tightly in answer to his question. Yes, Liam, replied Foster. You did it. Chapter 91, 2001, New York. A couple of hours later, after Liam had been given a more detailed account of his time in the past, he was fast asleep on one of the cots. His snoring seemed to reverberate through the arch even more noisily than the generator had. Foster worked over at the computer desk. Having scrubbed Bob's neural processor clean of brain tissue and blood, he connected it up to the computer system and began downloading the entire content of its hard drive. Bob's AI is in there amongst that, he said, nodding towards the loading bar slowly creeping across the screen. It's a lot of data uploading there, said Maddie. Well, he was away for nearly 6 months' time. All the time, his eyes and ears recording everything that was going on. So, what's the deal with Bob? Is his AI intact? Foster shrugged. I'm no computer expert, so I don't know how it works, but the code that makes up Bob's AI will merge with the computer systems. He taps the keyboard. You'll be able to communicate with him in there. Right. 6 months of learning. I guess that AI's code's a lot smarter than the idiot that plopped out of the birthing tube. Foster chuckled. Oh, yes. She looked at him. How are we going to grow ourselves another support unit? Those tubes are smashed. The gunk they were growing in has all gone off. He raised a hand. There's going to be a lot of work to do to get this field office online again. I'll help you with that. You look tired. If she was being honest, she would have said he looked ready to keel over and die. New clone embryos and growing solution. The generator needs replacing. The wall's fixing up. You need to replenish our supplies, he added. A new generator. That's going to cost money. Fine, said Foster. Just go and find a hardware store and buy another. We've got enough money. As much as you'll ever need. It's in a bank account. Cool. Do we get a debit card with that or something? That's one of the many things I'm going to need to go through with you before... His voice trailed off. Before what? Foster looked uncomfortable. Before I leave. Leave? Leave? You can't leave us. Neither of us know what the heck we're doing just yet. Jesus, I certainly don't. You did fine, Foster smiled. You did just fine. I'd say right now there's no team better trained to do this than you. You survived the ordeal. You'll be able to cope with pretty much anything else this job has to throw at you. Of that, I'm sure. Team? There's no team. There's just me and Liam now. She cast a glance at the bank of monitors in front of her and the upload bar, now inching past the halfway mark. Oh. And a computer system that's very soon going to start insisting we call it Bob. It was then they heard the soft scrape of feet behind them. They turned round to see Sal standing in the middle of the archway, a shopping bag in one hand, looking curiously down at the small crater of scooped-out concrete in the floor. So, what happened here? This place is a real mess, she said, shaking her head disapprovingly. I go out for a couple of hours to get some milk and bagels for breakfast and come back. It's like someone's been drilling holes in the wall outside, and someone dropped a bowling ball on the floor here. Sal? Maddie's jaw dropped. Sal! A dark eyebrow arched quizzically. Yeah? And? You're alive! Maddie leapt up from the desk and swept the confused girl into her arms. Oh my God, you're alive! You're alive! Foster could see Sal's bewildered face over Maddie's shaking shoulder. Is someone going to tell me what's been going on while I was out?